Which players do Landon and I disagree on the most in this year's class? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are just one sleep away from the NFL draft. How you doing, sir?
I think I've made this comment every year, but every year on the Wednesday before draft, or previously the Thursday before draft, I think of the Disney World commercial, right? The I'm too excited to sleep commercial.
That's exactly how I feel. Yeah,
that's how we are. And so the best way to kind of get that energy out of us so that we can sleep tonight is for you and I to get into an absolute brawl.
Drag out
brawl. This is going to be the last episode of this podcast, guys.
Yes, I hope you guys enjoyed the run.
two podcast hosts enter, one podcast host leaves, and we're going to be debating our horizontal boards and where we have some of these players ranked.
And let's just jump right into it. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you are seeing the boards that Landon and I have kind of created. Now, not every player that's going to be drafted is on here. These are just the guys that we have watched and put them into grades. So again, if you're on YouTube watching this, you can see Landon, his players are in the black lettering. Mine are in the red lettering. We've got a couple, what do we want to call them? Hot button players, hot button issues we want to get to. And let's start with a couple guys that are expected to go in the first or second round. I want to start with O'Cyrus Torrence, a guard from Florida. You have a first round grade on him. I've got him more of a kind of mid-second to later second round grade. I believe overall on my board he's like 35th or 36th. Why are you so high on him and why are you wrong?
I think he's just a very good player, man.
He really is.
I think he's this classic kind of player where he doesn't have a ton of flaws. He's incredibly skilled. He's done it at different types of competition. He took a step up from a lower level of competition to follow his coach to Florida, and then just stepped right into the SEC and went through the entire season without giving up a sack. And just played very well. I think even the reason that he isn't considered to be a generally higher prospect is he's a guard only, and I don't even know that he's got center flexibility here. I'm not sure. But I think even more specific to that, I think he's a guard for a team that's going to be wanting to play a lot of gap man scheme stuff. Like I think he could definitely play zone. Like I think that's something that he's a very talented player, so he has the ability. But I think that you're getting the most out of him if you're in that kind of system and not like, squaring him into a round hole, right? Like, I think that's why a lot of teams may kind of struggle with taking him later in the first round, because if he isn't a perfect fit on for what they're doing in their offensive scheme, they may not value him at the same rate that I do.
Well, and that's exactly why I have him just a little bit lower than you. And it's just, I really value the guards that can play multiple positions. You never know what's going to happen on a Sunday. You never know what injuries are going to pop up. And frankly, you never know what your roster is going to look like 2 years from now, right? You might stumble into two really good guards and all of a sudden there's not a spot for O'Cyrus Torrence to play. So comparing him to like Steve Avila, who we both have graded very similarly. Hey, if you got two awesome guards, you can play Avila at center. We've even seen him play tackle at TCU. I just knocked him a little bit because of the position flexibility and probably having to be in one specific type of scheme.
Yeah. And again, like that's the difference between him and Avila for me is that Avila has all those things. But the reason that I don't have Avila ranked higher necessarily is because when we're talking about playing the position of guard that he's going to be drafted in, I think O'Cyrus Torrence is just a better player right now.
I agree. Let's go through a couple more. I'm actually just looking at this right now. I see Josh Downs, the wide receiver from North Carolina. You got him in round 2. I've got him at the bottom of round 3. Actually, if I pull up my big board, he's pretty far down there. I'm even trying to look at him now. I think I have 64th overall, 3rd round grade. What are your thoughts on Downs?
I just think that these, and maybe I'm still a year or two too early on these guys, but I just think that these are the kind of players that that are going to start getting drafted higher now, because the really good sort of diminutive water bug type players who can get open and create space as we kind of continue on in a pass heavy league. These guys are going to get more value. So I think this is probably more a case of, I think, of my thoughts on the changing nature of the value of these types of players, as opposed to a disagreement on like the player himself. I think obviously he has incredible limitations, and he's a slot only player in a lot of ways. But I think that if you have a need for this guy, and you want to get him, and you have if you're looking to add a dynamic player who could be we know what this player is, a slot kick returner, punt returner type that can also be kind of a gadgety player who you can also use on a regular basis, maybe as a Z when he's not in the slot. You're probably going to have to draft those guys a lot higher than you have previously. Like I said, I could easily be a year early on this, but that's where I imagine if you're going to want a Josh Downs, you're probably going to have to take him in the second round.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. My thing, I have no issue taking slot receivers. Actually, in round 1, it doesn't bother me at all. And you can kind of see that where I
Jackson
have
Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, it's Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with smaller receivers either. I really like Zay Flowers. I think he's going to be one of my favorite possible picks the Cowboys could make in round 1. My issue with Downs is I was expecting him to be a lot more dynamic after the catch. And if you're going to be a 5'8.5" receiver with average speed, I want you to be awesome after you get the ball in your hands. I thought he was just fine. So I put those guys that are just kind of, small and fine in round 3.
And that's fair. I mean, like I said, I think that our disagreements are not about the player. I don't think here it's about the value of this position and where it is currently. You could end up being very right. He may get drafted in the second round, and that may indicate that I was right, but not necessarily. It just means where we're valuing these guys, and every team's gonna be different.
By the way, you have Zay Flowers as a round 1 grade. I have him as a round 2 grade. Yet that would be one of my favorite picks that the Cowboys could make at 26.
Listen, this is the madness that I went through these last 2 days, like trying to put this together because. And I'll give you another example of that when we did the Steve Avila, Jamar Gibbs conversation. Like I had to sit there, see, just to kind of peek behind the curtain. This is my true vertical board. So like we shouldn't be comparing Marcus's because I try to put them in there so we can have this conversation. But this I just overlaid on my true vertical board, and I really struggled with Jamar Gibbs and Steve Avila because I wanted to put Avila as my top of the second round grade. But if I put Gibbs there, it would probably indicate that I like them equally.
Exactly.
And I don't.
So tough.
And so this is the problem with doing these kind of boards.
All right, let's get to some more players that we have some disagreements on, including some big disagreements next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and the calories, then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. You've absolutely got to try it. If you're like me and you're trying to, be a little bit healthier as we're getting into the summer, but you don't want to compromise on taste, we've got the thing for you. It's Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. You're not even going to know that they're good for you. That's how great they taste. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Not sure how Built does it, but only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. We've been telling you, it feels like years, that you can go to built.com and order. Yeah, it has been. Go to built.com. You can order all your same boxes over there. But if you live close to a Walmart, go to the pharmacy section. You can pick up a 4-bar box of the cookies and cream, the double chocolate, or the coconut puff. Or if you live near a Sam's Club, run in there, get a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank us later. We also want to let you guys know about the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. You can join Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino and other Locked On NFL local experts as they're going to be doing a live NFL draft coverage presented by Ultimate Football GM. Kyle and Joe will be live during the first 2 days of the draft. And then on Saturday, they're going to get you caught up on every single round, kind of recapping you. Join the draft dudes for the first round tomorrow night live on YouTube on the Locked On NFL Scouting page at 7:30 Eastern Time. All right, Landon, let's talk about some other players that we have big disagreements on. And let's stay on offense because Jonathan Mingo, he's somebody that you have a second-round grade on. I have him at the bottom of my third round. We've talked about him before, wide receiver, Ole Miss. I just really struggle with this guy, to be honest.
Yeah, it looks like it because you have him graded all wrong.
These guys that play in these weird, wide open offenses, I just don't know how to grade them.
Yeah, but I mean, as a great evaluator once told you, I think that there's a reason to gamble on these height, weight, speed guys, right? So, listen, I think here's the bottom line with me and Mingo. I think he's part of what dictates value in the draft to me is intra-draft scarcity, right? So like players who they don't have a lot of other types similar to them in the same draft, I think they can rise up a little bit because if you're looking for a very specific type of defensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, whatever, the scarcity in the draft can actually drive up individual players. I think that this is a case where you've got a wide receiver. You don't have a ton of wide receivers who can kind of fit that mold of the X receiver, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about it with Cedric Tillman. We talked about it with Quentin Johnson. These are guys that, can fit that kind of mold and win on deep slants, that can win deep, that are bigger, that can, physical, play on the line, get off of press coverage. For me, I think Mingo is one of the only guys that kind of fits that mold, that can play that position, even though he didn't really play it too much in college. I think physically he has the traits to become a really good X receiver. And it's just what we just said. I'm banking on traits, right? Like it's not, and I don't like him as much as Tillman because I think Tillman's a little bit more refined and has similar, if not just as good, Jonathan Mingo's kind of athleticism. But I think that the reason I'm, bullish on Mingo is that kind of athleticism for that type of body type is rare, and he performed in an SEC offense. I understand it was very gimmicky. That Cedric Tillman's offense was also very gimmicky, but I think that those are the kind of traits that we'll bank on, and especially for the Cowboys, who X is the one position where they probably don't have someone who is a clear front runner at that spot.
So of all the receivers that are projected to go in the first 200 picks in this year's draft, Mingo is the only one over 205 pounds that ran in the 4.4s.
Yeah.
He's it. Like, you're right. Like, it is a rare body type, especially in this class. And that's why I think he is getting bumped up, is because we just don't have a lot of those big receivers. My question for him is just everything that I saw from him in college was in the slot, on a lot of RPO stuff where he's running wide open down the middle of the field. And I just sometimes struggle to see how that's going to translate in the NFL. And we talked about this yesterday with Jalen Hyatt, right? Like you have Hyatt quite a bit higher than I do for the same exact reasons. Like, how does that kind of stuff translate in the NFL? I don't know. And I'm probably going to be wrong on both players. But that is somebody we disagree on. I want to go to running backs because that's another position where we have some disagreements. You have Kendre Miller, the running back from TCU, in the third round. I have him in the fourth round. I have Zach Evans from Ole Miss in the third round. You have him in the fourth round. So can you explain the reasoning for why you have Miller and Evans where they are?
You just hate running backs. backs, and I don't
that's
mind.
Not, listen, that's not true at all. I've
No,
got
it's
look
not
how many
true.
running backs I have on this top 100.
I'm just kidding. Look, I think you and I had this conversation when we talked about these running backs specifically. I think you are valuing Zach Evans a lot more than I am because I don't like that type of runner. Like he takes a lot. He needs a lot of runway. He has incredible athleticism, but there is some McFadden to his game, right?
Yeah.
Where he needs a little bit to take off. He's not necessarily a great zone runner.
No.
I think he has some ability. He has a little bit more wiggle to him than you saw with McFadden at times, but like that breaks tackles. It doesn't mean that he's like breaking tackles and running away from guys all the time. So I like him. I just think that his skill set is it's not as unique or as difficult to find, and so I just don't know what he does exceptionally well, except for break tackles, I guess. Right? Once he, but that's really it's
Second
not even breaking tackles. Yeah, second level tackles, right? Yeah. It's not breaking tackles in the hole. It's like once he gets some momentum, he becomes like the juggernaut, right? What the X-Men character. He can't be stopped. So I think that kind of player is easier to find in other spots, and that's why I kind of didn't have him as high as
And I just it's perfect that we had these players where we do, because I value athleticism so much at running back. Like if you're going to draft a running back after the top 75 pick, just take one that's a fantastic athlete, and we'll try to basically coach you up to be a good running back, right? I value tools, but I think there's no doubt Kendre Miller is the more polished, ready to go NFL player. And if you're just looking in round 3 or round 4 for a guy that can come in right away and give you 14 carries a game, that probably is Kendre Miller.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I agree because that's where I've got him. I think he's the guy that, I mean, thank you for making my point. I think he's the guy that, of these like kind of past Charbonneau, right? Like once you get past Charbonneau, I think he is the guy that makes the most sense as someone that you would want to feature immediately as he's healthy, right?
Yes.
Or at least you could feel comfortable featuring him immediately when he's healthy. I think Roschon Johnson, Evans, Kane, Spears, all these guys, Bigsby, it doesn't really matter where they're ranked. The rest of these guys, I would like to see I feel like they need to be paired with another running back. I still feel very good about pairing Kendre Miller with somebody too.
Yep.
But I feel like he's the one guy of those guys that doesn't. I think he could carry the load for a little bit more than say Zach Evans or Roschon Johnson.
All right, let's talk about some defensive players that we disagree on next. Just want to let you guys know about Locked On's NFL mock draft special. It's here. It's bigger than ever. Follow along. All 32 teams first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Landon, let's talk about a couple of defensive linemen. Let's start with Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. You have a firm second-round grade on him. I've got him in the 3rd round, actually a little bit closer to the 4th round. I know the splashes are really good, and we saw him perform really well at the Senior Bowl. I just didn't love his tape, but apparently you believe he could be a starting level defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like looking at the journey a little bit with him, right? Like I agree that the tape didn't necessarily, based just on tape, I probably would have given him a very similar grade. But I really did like what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl, and I felt like it was an added dimension that we hadn't seen from him previously. So I wonder if there hasn't been some improvement. And specifically the reason that it moved the grade is because it's in the area of pass rush, right? Like that's the area where on tape, you didn't see it necessarily very well developed. You didn't see great hand usage. You didn't see a guy who necessarily knew how to unlock all the skills that he had. I think when we saw it, and look, pass rush drills at Senior Bowl is not the end all be all. It certainly isn't the same thing as tape. I'm not implying that, but what you saw from a skill development standpoint from Benton at that point in the Senior Bowl versus what you saw on tape, I thought he had moved the needle quite a bit. You add that in with the fact that he had I think if you go back and listen to the Locked On shows that we had then, I had issues with him at the time not being stout enough as a run defender for what I felt like he was going to be playing in the NFL. I think with the additions that you saw, or the improvement that you saw in the Senior Bowl, it actually makes some more sense for him to be kind of a not just a specifically nose tackle, like run stuffing nose tackle, but a guy who can play some nose tackle for you early and then actually rush the passer and be someone who pushes the pocket. And that's why I kind of put him up there in the bottom of the second round, because I think his ceiling, this is a guy who I feel like could be potentially on the rise and playing better football in the NFL than he did in college.
And you nailed why I'm a little concerned about him, is I just don't know what his anchor looks like in the run game, right?
That's fair.
And maybe I've been scarred by Neville Gallimore, right? Like this athletic pass rushing defensive tackle. You can't get on the field because they just don't hold up in the run game. And I'm not saying Benton's going to have that same issue to that degree, but it is my concern. Like, you've got to at least be functional as a run defender. And I think you saw it at times at Wisconsin. I'm just not sure. That's all.
It's listen, and the other thing I'll mention is the same thing that we mentioned when we talked about Byron Young, or not Byron Young. I'm sorry, Calvin. Scroll down to the bottom. The Illinois defensive tackle, nose tackle, all the way to the bottom. Calvin Avery. Sorry, the Illinois nose tackle. Right. This is another guy, Ben, who faced 3 or 4 of the best centers in all of college football during his season, right? Playing in that division as a nose tackle, as a defensive tackle, it's not easy. There's lots of good interior offensive linemen. So I think there is some truth to what you're saying. Obviously, that's exactly what I said about Benton when we first talked. I do wonder if he can't develop and put better run defense on tape. Now that he's faced some of these top end guys and gotten a little bit better hand usage through pass rush.
The last guy, or actually we have 2 more guys to get to. One of the biggest disagreements that we have is on Northwestern defensive tackle Adetomiwa Adebawore. I think I got it close.
Ah, well done.
I'm working on it. You have him as a first round grade. I have him as a third round grade. The athleticism is historically great. Running a 4.49 at 283 pounds. I mean, you could draft him inside the top 75 for his athleticism alone. I'm just not quite sure where to play him yet. And that's why I have a third round grade, but clearly you like him more.
Yeah. And I put him as an interior defensive lineman, but I could have easily put him as an edge because I see him as an inside outside guy. I think he definitely can reduce down and rush the passer as a 3 technique. I think you could put 10 pounds on him if he'll take it, and he could play 3 technique if you wanted. But I also think that he could be a really, really valuable inside-outside player. We just have not seen the development of those types of players at an elite rate in a long time. And I think this guy has the kind of rare athletic traits to be a valuable player, not just a tweener, but a guy who is both a defensive end and a defensive tackle. This is a guy who clearly has his best football ahead of him. And I think the comparison that I heard that really made it click for me was Rashawn Gary, right? Like Rashawn Gary is not an inside-outside guy, but he is a bigger defensive tackle with elite level athleticism similar to Tommy's, right? And I think that I had some doubts about this guy coming into the league. And then he came in, and it took him a little while, but he has become a very, very good power rusher and a good player for
as an edge rusher, though. Like, do you think he's going to play edge in the NFL?
I think he can play edge in the NFL. Yeah, I think he has that sort of athleticism. But I guess the question is, what is he going to play on third down when it's time to rush the passer?
Probably defensive tackle.
Right? I think he probably would be a defensive tackle. Yeah, but I also think that he could be a guy that is an elite run defensive end who can, if they decide to play action pass, can still get around the tackle and win, who could kick in and become a very, very good interior pass rusher. So he has a very different body type than almost any other player we've seen. But I think his impact, his upside impact, even though they're very, very different players, could be like Chandler Jones-ish, right? Where you kind of move him in and out where you need him, and he finds a way to win. Chandler Jones does it with long arms and explosiveness. This guy does it with just pure explosiveness.
Yep. Last one that we really disagreed on. Jaquelin Roy, a defensive tackle from LSU. I believe you have him in the 3rd round. I have him late 5th round. Again, I know that there's draft scars out there for me that I just haven't got over. And like Tommy Togiai is kind of the guy that he reminded me a little bit from Ohio State. Remember when we were talking about Tommy Togiai?
Sure.
Right. It's like a sub 300-pound nose tackle that doesn't have great athleticism. Like, how does that guy win in the NFL? And I guess that's my issue with Jaquelin.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I see a guy who has, the power that you need right away in the NFL, and I think that's not surprising for a nose tackle. This is not a guy that you're going to worry about his ability to kind of take on double teams or play strong against the run. I'm just kind of looking over at my notes. I think the thing that I really like at him is that he's not quite explosive enough to be a 3 technique, but even as a nose tackle, he has good hand movements. You'll see him backdoor plays with a quick swim move. He gets into the backfield at times, and he has pretty good lateral quickness for a guy that is 305, and I mean, he plays like he's 315 or 320. I mean, he's got such heavy hands and strong hands. And so I see a guy that, there is some pass rushing upside there. It's upside. It certainly isn't development. He does have some hand stuff that works well for him that he can develop. He is just a kind of pinballing nose tackle. So I do feel like you could put him in the middle of a pass rush and he could just push the pocket. So I think that when you've got that kind of nose tackle upside, and look, I don't want to play him at 3 technique, but he could play 3 technique, at like early downs especially, and I think that that's valuable. And doing so in the SEC, I think it was kind of easy to kind of lose track of a player like this, but he's got a ton of experience against good quality opponents. Nose tackles that can rush the passer a little bit have a little bit more value. And again, going back to the intra-draft scarcity, there's just not a ton of great interior defensive linemen. If this was another year, I probably would have bumped him down another round, but I think there's just not a ton of these guys in the draft, and so you're probably going to have to go maybe a round earlier than you would have.
And we know the Dallas Cowboys like him quite a bit. I got to imagine early day 3, maybe that's their 4th round pick. I do know that the Cowboys have a lot of interest there. So I'll probably be wrong. I'll probably be too low, but it's a guy that's a little bit of a hot button topic between you and I. What I've learned the most after looking at this board is you and I agree on a lot of these players, and we see them very similarly. There's just a couple guys that, depending on their role or how you view that position kind of going into the NFL, is how we differ on a few.
Yeah, I think the process of how we stacked our boards was different. And that's fine. But I think that seeing the players very similarly, that's probably because we spent all offseason talking about them, and so I think it was great to kind of parse that out and see exactly what the differences are, and now we're ready to draft, baby. Let's do it.
We are here. The NFL draft is finally here. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day, and we want to thank you for listening to this entire draft cycle. Right? It's been absolutely crazy. We've covered a lot of players, a lot of different scenarios. Landon, you and I will actually be back tomorrow before the draft just to kind of wrap up any rumors and rumblings that we're hearing. And then late on Thursday night, after the Cowboys pick, or maybe don't pick, depending on what they do, we'll be here to break it all down and get you ready for day 2. Follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys tomorrow for a big day.